I think it was after my first deployment where I was like, at least subconsciously, I was like, no, this is going to be something that is going to always be a part of me. And so I might as well see where it takes me.
Now you talk about and we'll loosely call it the unhealthy approach of wanting to kind of stay in that circle.
Yeah.
What was it like for you going on throughout your entire career and coming out? Did you struggle with losing that, or was it easy to walk away from it?
That's a good question, man. I think, I think there's a part of you that is, again, after, you know, over 20 years, I got to serve. There's your entire young adulthood is dictated. I was going to say formed, but is dictated to by the big organization. And so, to cut that loose is also cutting loose your young adulthood, and now coming face to face with the fact that, you know, like there's that funny thing where like a guy joins at 18 and 20 years later he gets out and he's still listening to the same music, wearing the same clothes from, cause it's like a time capsule. And so, for me, it wasn't so much at that point, 20 years later, it wasn't about, the difficulty about leaving the organization, cause it's going to stay with you. I think, for me, I'd gotten to a point where I didn't feel compatible with the organization I had initially joined. The world changes, and the military, I guess, is supposed to change with the times. And I mean, I see the merits to that, but it got to the point where, I didn't feel compatible with it anymore.
Welcome, everybody. I'm joined this week by Eric Franco. Eric joined the Army right out of high school on an airborne contract. He eventually served 23 years and actually got the opportunity and passed SF selection in his early 30s. He retired in 2021 as an E7. Early in his military career, he began training MMA on his own, and then the Army gave him the opportunity to become a combatives instructor. He actually had the dream of becoming the next Randy Couture, albeit maybe a smaller version. But the punches to the face and the checking kicks with his shins just got old, and so he shifted his focus to just jiu-jitsu and eventually earned a black belt. In 2023, out of the military for a couple of years, he wasn't looking to own his own business, but as he describes it, one door closes, another doors open up. And what I mean by that is he and his wife now own and operate Virtus BJJ in Paso Robles, California. I hope you enjoy the conversation. I appreciate him opening up the studio for us to record there. So let's get into it. Here's episode 121 with Eric Franco.
Let's start it easy.
Cool.
Talk to me where you grew up.
So I grew up in LA, West LA, Santa Monica area, born in the 80s, and then came up, you know, 80 and 90 kid. So before the advent of technology and all the distractions it allows, or the positive aspects of it. So yeah, down in LA, grew up in the 80s and 90s.
Big family, small family?
I'm the oldest of four, but the extended family is ginormous. Yeah.
Now, when you say LA, has your family been in LA a long time, or?
Yeah. So both of my parents came over from Mexico in the late 60s. They settled in Santa Monica. And so, you know, they'd been well established by the time I came around.
What'd your mom and dad do? What'd your dad do for a living?
My dad was a laborer, man. He worked at a water heater company in Santa Monica, just on the assembly line, you know, dealing with sheet metal and stuff. And my mom, she worked at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. Yeah, just kind of admin type gal. So yeah.
As a kid in Santa Monica, were you a surfer? Were you down at the beach a lot?
I wished. No, we were of modest means. We weren't struggling. My parents, you know, hustled for us for sure. But there wasn't a whole bunch of expendable time or income for anything. So no, we just, you know, goofed off, really.
What took up your time as a kid? Were you into sports?
You know, it was the come back in when the street lights turn on, you know, so I'm out playing with the neighbor kids. Not so much anything organized or formal. Never did like jiu-jitsu or anything like that. Mom and dad were working, man. So, you know, once school was out, we're back home and just living family life.
How were you at school?
I graduated, you know, I was, my interests were outside the classroom, I think. Or my dreams were. And so I got by, but I was no stellar student for sure.
What were your dreams when you talk about that as a kid?
I liked being outside. I think because we grew up in the city, that I was very, very much attracted to the outdoor stuff. So like we never went camping. We never, you know, went hiking or nothing. You know, we're a Mexican family. We don't go out there. But as a result of that, I think I had a fascination with being outside. So I always dreamed of, you know, going camping, doing outside stuff. A lot of, you know, some classmates or whatever, like, oh, we went camping this weekend, and I'd be, oh, that sounds cool. And I'd get like a, you know, catalog back in the day, and I'd flip through like camping gear. Like, oh, I'd made my little list of things I always wanted, but no, never materialized.
As far as coming towards the end of school and going into adulthood, was the military already on your radar at that point?
Yeah. I think, so I had my parents were saints, man. And so they're very careful with what sorts of movies and stuff we watched. So we watched a lot of old classic stuff. And so, I'd like watching, like old war movies, and you might agree that a lot of the older stuff, it's not gory or super gnarly. So, you know, my parents were okay with watching them. And I kind of started, growing an affinity towards service. And so even the cheesy stuff, like, you know, Anchors Away, like those old World War II, like musicals and stuff. And I was like, oh, neat, uniforms and, you know, parades and things, you know, kind of ignorantly. But I did already have the kind of draw to service. We're Catholic family, and so that was a big theme in our upbringing too. And so I was kind of drawn to the adventure of it all. Like growing up here in California, we learned about the California missions and how they came from the old world to the new world. To me, that seemed terribly exciting, like that adventure, and then coming here and doing something worthwhile. So that kind of build up in my formation, I think, started pointing me in the direction of it too. And then by the time high school was wrapping up, I knew I wanted to join. Yeah.
Were you set on the Army at that point in time, or did you kind of go look at all the branches?
It was between the Marines and the Army. And the Marine recruiters were just kind of notoriously Marine recruiters, man. They weren't very personable. I was like, dang, dude, I'm not even in. You're already treating me like garbage. So, but ultimately I went with the Army because they had an opportunity for me to be a paratrooper, which really appealed to me because it terrified me. I mean, even joining the military terrified me, right? But I was like, all right, I'll try to challenge myself to do that, and then take it one step further to jump out of aircraft seemed awesome. So that's why I ultimately went with the Army.
And what year was that?
I joined 1998. So
first Gulf had already happened.
Yeah.
What were your parents' thoughts as far as you joining the military at that point?
Yeah, I think on one hand they're like, dang, he's not going to grow up to be the doctor or the lawyer that we were always telling him he should be. But
because your grades were leaning towards
my grades are not
medical school.
Yeah. But I think on the other hand, I think they might have been a little relieved that at least I had a plan. And so they were lukewarm, but you know, they're awesome folks. So they still supported.
Did you keep yourself out of trouble as a young kid, or?
Yeah. For the most part, yeah. Again, towards the end of high school, I did some stupid stuff. I think
we all did.
I'd like to think is a universal occurrence, but I did some stupid stuff and I got in a little bit of trouble. Nothing nefarious, just bad decision making. But then I got that kind of cleared up, and that allowed me to pursue it.
How was it when you actually went in? Like, you're in boot camp now.
Yeah.
Did that change for you?
So I'm at Fort Knox, and the notorious first morning, right? So, you know, they're hollering and screaming at you a little bit, but not a whole bunch. But then I remember that first morning at, you know, 05 or whatever it was, and it's on, man. Like just the trash cans, the screaming, the yelling. And I do remember going like, I think I've made a mistake, because I was already jet lagged from the trip from LA to Kentucky, and then all the, you know, long nights of doing paperwork or whatever to get you launched. And I remember the first morning I was like, I think I've made a mistake, but I made it, you know, that one day. And then, you know, they always tell you, you know, just make it to lunch, or make it to breakfast, make it to lunch, make it to dinner. And so I took that to heart, that approach. And so that got me through. And then I was succeeding. I was doing pretty well. And so that kind of boosted my confidence, and I kept persevering through.
When you went on that first enlistment, was your plan to do a career or just one enlistment and then reevaluate it?
I don't think so. I think it was like, I'll do this for now. I think I had a little bit of like my wanting to make my folks happy in the back of my head. So like, no, I'll do this. I'll get the college money and then I'll go on from there. But no, it didn't turn out that way.
How far into that first enlistment did it kind of change for you? And where you're like, okay, let's make this a career, or did it not change in that first enlistment?
I think it did, because right smack in the middle of my first enlistment was 9/11. And so then the deployment started happening. And then, you know, after that first deployment, it was, it becomes such an ingrained part of you because you spend day in and day out downrange, and you develop that cohesiveness or that brotherhood with your folks and everything, your buddies. And so then it became kind of like, I can't imagine my life without this circle, this experience. Not necessarily the healthiest probably way to have approached it, but I think it's just a byproduct of whatever it is you go through with these folks and that organization and the lifestyle. So I think it was after my first deployment where I was like, at least subconsciously, I was like, no, this is going to be something that is going to always be a part of me. And so I might as well see where it takes me.
Now you talk about and we'll loosely call it the unhealthy approach of wanting to kind of stay in that circle.
Yeah.
What was it like for you going on throughout your entire career and coming out? Did you struggle with losing that, or was it easy to walk away from it?
That's a good question, man. I think, I think there's a part of you that is, again, after, over 20 years I got to serve, there's your entire young adulthood is dictated. I was going to say formed, but is dictated to by the big organization. And so, to cut that loose is also cutting loose your young adulthood, and now coming face to face with the fact that, like there's that funny thing where like a guy joins at 18 and 20 years later he gets out and he's still listening to the same music, wearing the same clothes because it's like a time capsule. And so, for me, it wasn't so much at that point, 20 years later, it wasn't about, the difficulty about leaving the organization, because it's going to stay with you. I think, for me, I'd gotten to a point where I didn't feel compatible with the organization I had initially joined. The world changes, and the military, I guess, is supposed to change with the times. And I mean, I see the merits to that, but it got to the point where, I didn't feel compatible with it anymore. And so that part sucked, because then it does feel like, something's gone that's never going to be, you're able to get back. And as you go up in rank too, it stops being, for me, it stops being as fun. It becomes more about, admin stuff or whatever. And the one positive thing about moving up in rank is the soldier care aspect, that you're able maybe to have at least within your limited sphere of influence, you could, help your dudes out. But then even then, man, relating to the newer generation is also, pretty tricky. So by the time I was getting out, I was ready to transition out, but there's definitely the bittersweetness of it, for sure.
Was it a struggle to get to 20, or was it at 20 you're like, nah, I'm just done, I'm going to get out? You know
what? My 20 years came with the pandemic. And so by this time I'm in the National Guard, a full-timer in the National Guard here in California. And, they're slashing budgets for this, that, and the other because of the riots and because of the pandemic, and budgets are getting rerouted all over the place. And so, I lost my full-time position with the Guard, which was kind of what sealed the deal, because I'm not going to make a life out of, being a weekend warrior type guy. And so, but I'd been active in one capacity or another for so many years, I was able to make the default career out of it, that by the time they slashed it, it coincided with my getting my 20-year letter, and it didn't make sense for me to stay in anymore.
You mentioned when you went in, the Army gave you the option for a paratrooper, or MOS. Was that a contract that you got?
Yeah.
Straight going in?
Yeah. That was freaking cool, man. And I got $3,000 as a bonus, heavily taxed, but yeah.
From the physical fitness aspect, was it hard for you, or were you already in pretty good shape to go to that level?
No, I was not already in good shape to be at that level, but in particular, I don't know if you know about Airborne school, but it's a lot of running. Honestly, the jumping out of the plane, learning how to roll and fall and all that kind of stuff, it's not terribly difficult. So I always feel like that attach some difficulty to it. So what they did, I think, is just you're running everywhere. You're running to the chow hall, you're running to the classroom, you're running to the field, whatever. And there's a couple of big old runs that you have to do. That was the hardest part of it. But because I went from boot camp at Fort Knox to advanced individual training at Fort Bragg, and after that, finally to Fort Benning for Airborne school. So I had those months of prep that made it. Plus I was still 18. So I had plenty of build up to get ready. They got me ready for sure.
How was that selection process for you though? I mean, did you just struggle with it, or because like you mentioned, day one, banging the trash can, it's like, oh, maybe I made a mistake. Right. When you commit to that level.
So I started experiencing some success, which felt great, man, because I kind of sucked at the end years of high school. So to finally feel like I'm succeeding at something, because there's light academics in boot camp, and advanced individual training was fairly rigorous academically, and so but I was doing well, and so that really boosted my confidence. But the physical part of it too, I was also enjoying some success as I got in better shape. And so I think it wasn't, I was hungry for it. It's like, cool, what could I do next? Because I was enjoying that success. It's one of those, you're good at something because you like it, and you like it because you're good at it. So that symbiotic kind of feeding off each other, that really helped. And it was a fun time, man.
Did you do your whole 20 years in Airborne?
Let me see. Except the tail end. Yeah. I was in a PSYOP unit, psychological operations unit there, Airborne. And then
that's why you're asking me all those weird questions.
These are not the questions you're looking for. And then after a couple of deployments, I kind of wanted to slow down. So I switched to being a parachute rigger. And that's where it was fun as heck, man. It was just jumping and folding parachutes all the time. And then from there, I tried out I went to selection for special forces. And then towards the tail end of my career, I was in a schoolhouse environment. So they had officer candidate school and a couple other schools. So by then
were you an instructor at that point?
Yeah. That's why. So by that point, it was time to kind of do the non-commissioned officer thing and start teaching the next generation, I guess. So at that point I wasn't, but I logged 86 jumps, and I got the knees in the back to prove it, Yeah.
When did Army Combatives come to you?
Yeah. So, when the global war on terror was at its zenith, I got the opportunity. I got hired on here at Camp Roberts, California, at Task Force Warrior, which was a pre-mobilization site. And so one of the checklist items was that soldiers that are about to deploy have to go through is some hand-to-hand stuff. And so I got hired on, and this was 2009. So, UFC and jiu-jitsu, the popularity of it all is it's coming to a head. It hasn't quite jumped the shark yet, maybe, but it's getting there. And so I had done combatives in the military, and then I started training the outside down in LA. And then so I got up to like blue belt level, and I'd heard about this team, and I was like, hey, I'm blue belt, and I'd love to come on. Nothing was impressive to these guys because they're really good. Nothing in my resume was impressive. All they saw was like, oh, a body, he trains, he's going to understand the lingo, and he wants to work. So they hired me, not because I'm any sort of good. But then I got taught the Army way, the Army Combatives way, which, in contrast to what we do, there's no referee, there's no rules. And so the context is different, even from MMA, where there's still some rule set. A soldier possibly in a hand-to-hand situation, everything's on the table. So we have to approach our system with that mindset, because if you start worrying about or take for granted that they're not going to crank back your pinky, that's a bad thing. And so a lot of some differences there, but once they got me kind of spun up on how they do stuff, I was on the team, and it was fantastic, man. It was really fulfilling to be able to teach brother and sister soldiers, a little bit of what I started really developing a passion for, and then sent them off downrange with that.
Had you done any form of martial arts or combatives training before going to that unit?
No.
That team?
Yeah. I had started, so I got it in me that I was going to be the next Randy Couture because UFC is really cool. So I started training down in...
You're a little small.
Yeah. Down at PKG Academy in LA. And so that's how I got up to blue belt, but mostly no-gi stuff for MMA. So very rudimentary approach to jiu-jitsu really if we're just isolating it. So and then I did a couple amateur fights and did okay. I didn't lose. And so I came with that before going to the combatives team. But again, I still had to learn how to relearn because it wasn't a sport approach. It was this dude's trying to tear your face off. So much different approach.
Is that combatives team to train you to be instructors or to train you to be a fighter representing the Army?
It was initially they trained me up. What, me as a soldier or me as an instructor?
As a soldier, like going to that?
No, yeah, it's just, so that particular team just spun you up on some basic stuff so you could deploy. What ended up happening is enough of us on the team, and it wasn't very big. I think at its biggest was maybe like 6 of us. We got a little bit of money and we started wearing Army rash guards and shorts, and we'd go to competitions and kind of be a impromptu recruiting asset. And so we linked up with some recruiters and like, oh yeah, well, here's some shorts, or the Task Force Warrior, they bought us some stuff. And so we'd start competing a bunch. And we'd go and we'd do some of our guys did the Army Combatives tournament at Fort Benning. So we got to, our main mission was of course to train soldiers that are going downrange. And then on the side, again, because there's all this global war on terror money floating around, then we got to do a little bit of ad hoc recruiting through competing.
When did you make the switch to just focusing on jiu-jitsu?
After getting punched in the face, man, it sucks. I just had, and also MMA stopped being fun because I had fights coming up. So, it went from, and that was probably just my fault because it was just like, I'll take the next one because I was like trying to get after it. Again, I wanted to be the next Randy Couture. So, in training up for these fights, it started becoming very much feeling like work, and it took a lot of the fun out of it, a lot of the joy that I initially had. And so I think admitting that to myself let me know that I wasn't meant to be a Randy Couture. And it was kind of like, just like trying to go to Airborne school or trying to join the military, something that terrified me. I'd never been in a street fight. And so to now do it on purpose was super enticing and terrifying. But it was like, check, I did it. I know I could do it. But getting punched in the face sucks. And so does checking kicks with your shins. Just like shin on shin, like a bat pipe to your shins, man, sucks. And I got these scrawny legs, and it just stopped being fun because it sucked. And then my wife and I were now expecting a baby, and I was trying out for special forces. So I needed to start, working out, doing a bunch of road marches and things, and not have banged up knees or shins and stuff. So it was this conglomerate, this big old kind of everything coming to a head where I was like, nah, it's time for me to rotate out of this. But jiu-jitsu, as you well know, it relatively low impact, and then you suck, and so you're hungry to keep learning, and you can because you're not walking away like, if you maybe hyperextend your arm or some fluke accident, but you're like, no, I gotta take a deep dive into this because it's mentally addicting. Like, man, what are they? And the days you don't train, it's like, what did they learn? What did I miss out on? They're all gonna get me now. So I stuck with jiu-jitsu because it just that fascination, like how deep can I get with this? And you could get pretty deep.
Were you able to avoid any significant injuries during the time that you were actually competing? Thank
God. Yeah, no, I never had any significant injuries. I definitely lucked out.
Now you mentioned knees and backs from the jumps.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned obviously the experience and the pain that comes from training. Mm-hmm. You went to Special Forces selection. Yep. Did all of that impact you, or how was that process? How'd you?
I was at my peak, I guess, in my early 30s when I did that, which is super old for guys trying out. But I think what I had by my early 30s was a little bit more grit. So I didn't have anything physically that was impeding me. I was in the best shape of my life when I went to selection. You have to be like, your fitness has to be the last thing you're worried about. And, so I did really well. I got selected my first time around. It's not terribly uncommon, but it's not, you know, there's a lot of times that guys have to go multiple times to pass. And so I was super stoked. I made it the first time around. But physically I was set. I was doing all right.
Looking back on your career now, would you have done anything different?
I might've tried out for special forces earlier on. Just to have, like I said, I did fine. I did great on and everything physically. But I think I might've done it earlier if I could have, just because what held me back was this, am I ready yet? Am I ready yet? Am I ready yet? And, again, because you can't be too physically fit to go, not having been to selection before, and all you hear is secondhand stories from Green Berets that already made it through. I was, super scrupulous about, you know, am I ready to go now? But yeah, it's a minor thing really, but I would have gone earlier just to have been around longer. You said you were in your 30s, so you're already seeing that you're on the tail end of your career. Did you end up deploying with special forces? In support of them, yeah, to parts of the Middle East and other all over the place, really, in support of them. But I never deployed as a Green Beret.
And where I'm going with that is, and you already mentioned this, if you could have redone it, done it earlier. But as far as, and maybe this is overly personal, was it merely just the opportunity to challenge yourself to see if you could make it through it?
I think so, man. And I think, again, in his providence, God was probably like, no, this, you know, you're starting a family and I got other plans for you. And so I think that was a big part of it. And that's not the person that should be on a team. I don't claim to know what's the best personality to have on a team, but I don't think it was me. And I think exactly what you described, it was me. I wonder if I could make it through special forces school. And that was it. I don't think I really had it in me to then continue on with that lifestyle at that stage in my life, which is why I say, I wonder if I would have started earlier, would that have turned out differently? But, yeah, no, that was definitely it.
One of the things that I've been talking to people about the podcast, and originally the intention was to talk to people about preparing for their transition out of these careers. But one of the things I've been thinking about doing is start asking, like yourself, you've gone through selection. For somebody who might be listening who wants to go to selection, what advice, now that you've gone through it, and maybe even having gone through it a little bit older, what advice would you throw out to somebody?
There's a gazillion and one workout programs now for guys that are hoping to go through it. Just stick with one. And then, you know, just time your life out well. So it's different. If you're active duty, you're kind of at the mercy of what your organization allows you to do. You do the best you can, and then you got lots of other things to worry about. For guard guys or reservists, I think you have a little bit more latitude in preparation, but time out your life and then plan as if you're not going to make it. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but because everyone, you know, have a positive attitude, you'll make it. There's a time for that. But in planning when you're going to go and how you're going to get ready, you have to plan for the real possibility that you're not going to make it through at any given stage in the training. So if you don't make it through selection, well, great, that's fine. You just kind of fall back and life continues. You make it through selection, then you start the qualification course. If at any stage, you know, you don't pass one of the phases, then where does life pick up from? And it means different things for different guys. You know, some of them will be like, well, I'm going to get back to it. Well, if you're a family guy, you know, give it a second thought, because it's going to eat up your entire life when you're going through it. If you're a family guy, you want to give that some serious consideration. But, you know, if you're a young, hungry dude, then, you know, again, give yourself some fallbacks and some safety nets in case it doesn't pan out. And then you could kind of just pick up life from there instead of wallowing in dang it, I didn't make it. But, you know, do what you can. You know, they like smart guys. They're when I was going through, they were starting to look for choir boys, like clean records, clean everything. And so, you know, just be a good dude, have a lot of experience to bring to the table. Cause in special forces in particular, they're, you know, they have the 18 X-ray program where you could sign in or enlist as a SF guy and to go through a long process and eventually make it through. But you bring a lot more to a team with some applicable experience. So if you don't have a degree, which gives you maybe a little bit of something to bring to the table, then do enough in your career early on that you're bringing something valuable to the team. So that could be anything. If you're an EOD guy, be the best EOD guy. If you're an infantry guy, be the, know your weapons inside out. So you really have to bring something unique that contributes to the team.
That's a unique perspective that you bring in that I don't think a lot of people think about. Is 18 years old, right out of high school, sign my contract. I'm guaranteed the chance to go. But what life experience do you bring to the team?
Right.
As opposed to like you were going through into your 30s. So now you've at least got not only life, but you've got military experience. Mm-hmm. So it's that balancing act of what's best for the organization.
Yep. And from what I understood, a lot of the 18-year-old, the 18 X-ray guys, they'd put them straight into the team sometimes, but they've got a lot of catching up to do because they get fast-tracked even through the ranks. By the time they're done with the Q course, I think they're like E5s and stuff, sergeants, young sergeants with zero to very little military experience. So they kind of have to like hurry up and spin them up. But that's time that they could be the opposite end of the spectrum. You could have a grizzled E6, a staff sergeant, and it's got tons of experience and a squad leader and everything, and bring something already. They don't have to spin you up. So you make yourself desirable or marketable to the team because they got very little time to spin you up.
You mentioned getting stationed up here in the Paso Robles area. As far as your deployments or stations, where did you like the best?
Oh man, here. Yeah, for sure here. I was in Santa Barbara for a little bit when I was a parachute rigger, and that was fantastic. But up here, I also got to do San Diego. I was on the border mission when the Border Patrol was severely undermanned, and they called up the National Guard to help them out. And so that was a lot of fun. That's where I met my wife. So, and then, but up here was great because it's training country, and I like to train, so when you're too close to the flagpole at any, base or posting, it kind of gets, you're worried about external things. But at least here up at Camp Roberts, it was training country, man. Day in and day out, we're training soldiers. So that was a lot more gratifying.
By the time you were ready you got out what year?
2021.
Did you already have your black belt at that point?
No, I've been a black belt for a year.
So what was your plan? Because obviously now we're sitting in your studio today, and I want to get to that. But what was your plan coming out? What were you thinking you were going to do?
Dang, I don't think I know.
No one else has ever said that, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, I think I was training at a school here, and the guy that owned it there, right before the pandemic, or as it was kicking off, in a previous life, he was a real estate guy. So he did a for sale by owner for us. He represented us. We got our current home, and then his commission was our buy-in into the school, into the academy. So we became part owners of that. And we started seeing that opportunity was presenting itself, again, right as I was getting ready to figure out if I'm getting out, and then the job falls out from under my feet. So it was by necessity and by providence that we're laid into that opportunity.
So it was merely that because the studio you were training at kind of offered you the opportunity. Yeah. You didn't really go looking for it.
No, I mean, we'd been training there, and then, I'm
talking about from like the business perspective.
Oh, no. If it wasn't for that, I think I might still be in, begrudgingly, but I think I might have still stayed in.
And you mentioned meeting your wife. Your wife's a veteran also, correct?
Yeah.
And did she get out at the same time with you?
No, she got out. She did, like 8-10 years, but she got out when we got pregnant with our daughter. And so she got out there just because the military is not particularly, despite their best efforts or what they say about, family first and all this stuff, it can't, they got a mission to do. And so it became, not conducive to motherhood. And so she just decided to end her career.
I would also imagine, not having been in it, it's got to be difficult just as a marriage, because if you're getting deployed one direction, she's getting deployed another direction. How do you have a central meeting point? Yeah,
no, we avoided that right on time. Because that would have been coming. And so instead she was super supportive. You know, she moved out when we moved out to North Carolina for the Q course, and, you know, she came out super duper supportive. It helped that she knew that world, having been in it herself, and my father-in-law is a vet. And so it runs big in our families. And so, that just allowed her to be way more supportive, and I'll be eternally grateful for that, for sure.
So when did it come, the idea for you to own your own studio? Yeah. And be your own boss?
A couple of months ago, things soured with my partner. And so we broke loose, and a lot of the students, this is where some of that like weird stuff in jiu-jitsu, the jiu-jitsu world happens, but I was the head instructor. So my partner had moved on to do other stuff and out of state. And so a lot of the students, I was with them. And so when you kind of forced us out, when we parted ways, they're like, all right, so where are you going to open up your school? We didn't know what we were going to do. It sucked, getting blindsided like we did. But then to have the support of the students, I'm humbled to say it was about 80% of the students were like, okay, we're done there. Where are you going to open up your school? And so we started training at a buddy's, you know, as a traditional like workout gym, Strong First here in Paso. And everyone brought their mats from their house, and we kept training once a week or a couple times a week, you know, for free. I wasn't charging anyone or nothing. We were just kind of rolling, and that solidarity, man, was crushingly humbling, you know, for me. Like it wasn't loyalty to me. I hope it was more to what we had built up as a team. And so it was through their persistence, through their encouragement that we opened this place up this past year.
And how'd you come up with the name?
Virtus, Latin for virtue, man. And it's an homage to that first group of folks that encouraged us to open up a school. I see them as people of virtue, and it just great people, man. You'll meet them here, and they were the ones that really encouraged us and supported us financially. The mats were sitting on, the paint, everything, man. It was all a team effort. Everyone came in here and did it and helped me out, and so it was kind of in homage to them that I see them as people of virtue, and I think the more people like them in the world, the better the world is. So it was an homage to them.
There's a lot of podcasts out there today, a lot of people talking about jiu-jitsu. I train jiu-jitsu. I truly believe, especially from my side of the house, the first responder community, it's very important. But one of the things that I've seen from interacting, not only on the mats doing jiu-jitsu, but doing this podcast, is how much jiu-jitsu can give veterans and first responders that community again. Are you experiencing that also?
Absolutely, man. We participate in the Heroes Jiu-Jitsu program. And this is basically an organization that will help kind of promote your school if you support first responders, military, veteran, even teachers. And so every Monday at 6, we offer free classes for them. So, you know, we allow lots of correctional officers in there because we got a prison, and then obviously our cops and deputies. And we will loan them a gi, and they just take free classes. And I think for them, it's essential. For you guys, you know, first responders, it's essential. You guys are out there all the time. And, you know, in today's world where we're so liability adverse, you know, going to your gun maybe isn't rightfully so the first option. You need to protect yourselves too, right? And then for our vets, what I see is the desire, the need, the longing for that camaraderie that they used to have when they were still in. And so I think it's in suffering through things with other people that those bonds are formed. And so in microcosm, in some way, you know, the suffering we encounter on the mats, I think is where that is met or satisfied. And hopefully for our LEOs, hopefully we're able to keep them savvy with some tools that could keep them safe, man. Cause we support them 100% here.
We talked about this before we started recording. now's your marketing side of it coming in. Somebody's thinking about getting going. Would you recommend an even balance between gi and no gi? Would you recommend starting one over the other, or just focusing on one over the other?
Well, all right. So I'm biased. So I think everybody is. I think I'm a purist. I love the traditional stuff about our art. And I think it's a good idea to start with gi, because there's the handles and the friction and everything that happens with the gi. But I think if you're gonna do no gi, you better get started when you're younger and you could do it, because for me, gi or no gi is so dynamic and it's so changing. And then even technique wise, like every week there's some new technique or something that's taking over the no gi, and it goes through these waves and these evolutions of so no gi has become, in my view, this homogenous just grappling. It's not even jiu-jitsu anymore. It's this blend of jits and wrestling, and it's grappling now. And so for me as a purist, my bias leans towards traditional gi, just so that you could experience that before you get thrown into now, and it's kind of like if grappling has become the MMA or of jiu-jitsu, right? Because now you have to know jits, you have to know wrestling, a bunch of stuff to be, if you're competitive. If you're just out for the experience and do whatever, but if you're competing, I think like you would need at least a light exposure to a bunch of styles. So for me, it's just like center on this one thing, get good at one thing, and that's where I come from.
Putting the old man hat on and somebody who's got the knees and the backs from jumping.
See, I keep shifting. I can't find my weight, man.
How does an old guy keep going with, especially if they're starting older, but if they're already into it, keep going as an older jiu-jitsu practitioner?
Yeah, man, longevity is the name of the game. So you don't have to train 5 days a week. But if you do, and I tell this to everyone, not even just my older guys, it's train at a level of intensity that you could sustain 5 days or however many days a week you want to train. So, because we get overzealous, we have to get that win, we have to end up on top, we have to pass the guard. No, you don't. Sometimes you'll learn just as much by your failures as your successes. So, but the biggest thing is just be cognizant of your limitations and train according to them. There's no shame in it. You're awesome just for even having the courage to step onto the mat at that age of a certain age. So stick with it, have fun with it, enjoy it, and reap the benefits of a responsible approach to training.
Have you experienced yet many of the veterans or first responders coming in and struggling to let the ego not come with them on the mat?
Thankfully, no. I haven't had ego be an issue. What I do see with some of our law enforcement guys is they train because they're going to go to work that night. And so their intensity is real. They approach training in a very real world way. So their intensity is always a little bit higher. And so when our cops or our COs come in, we're like, dude, we're just training right now. But it's just, they have that mentality because they're still in it, man. They're still in the fight. And so I don't blame them for it, but now it's, just matching people accordingly, and either by size or experience level to kind of mitigate that. But I don't fault them for it at all. Like, they're going to work that night, man. Like they're training for it.
From a business owner's perspective, any advice you can give to a veteran or a first responder looking to become your own boss? Something that maybe you've already experienced that you didn't think of?
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And I was in the super privileged position to have a membership waiting for me to open, as opposed to having opened a school and then having to market to bring folks in. So you can't start marketing early enough if you're starting off, if you want to do your own school, but don't be afraid, because I think we have such ginormous teams, around the world, in the game. And so just, we're not affiliated with anybody. I decided that we were going to be on our own. And with that comes the challenges of, curriculum development and being unique and establishing your own culture. that's both the blessing and the curse, because you have to start a lot of it from the ground up, and by and large, it's going to be shaped by you and by the way your students perceive you. So if you, because I think we've all been to schools where it's super competition centric, and so it's very ego driven, and everyone's very much after, you know, getting ready for their next competition. Decide what kind of culture you have. So here I'm not going to push anyone to compete as any sort of metric to, you know, where you're at or anything. It's encouraged, but I'm not going to push it on folks, because it's not for everybody. And so and the biggest thing I'd say, business wise, is if you neglect a kids program, you're missing out on a big chunk, man. And have a good kids program. Don't just be a babysitter. Be personable with the parents and engage with them, but authentically. Don't be fake. And I think as vets, we can do that really well. But yeah, the kids program, it could really float you if you do it well, and you're creating lifelong practitioners and lifelong students if you're doing it right.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I wish you all the continued success, man.
Thank you very much, dude. Thanks for coming.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.